Alright, hello everyone, and welcome to another video about a variant Magic format, if you want to call it that. And this time we're looking at a bit of a throwback here. This is Pre-Innistrad Legacy. So cast your mind all the way back to mid-2011, New Phyrexia and M12 are the most recent sets, and we do not yet have cards like Delver and Secrets, really juicing up the tempo decks in the format. No Snapcaster Mage finding its way into the slower blue decks, and we don't have Avacyn Restored, so no Griselbrand, most notably, and also no Terminus. So Miracles does not have a stranglehold on the format just yet, and we're not getting these ridiculous show and tell, sneak attack, reanimate draws powered by Griselbrand either. So this is a kind of slower, more chill version of Legacy back in simpler times. And so I'm in a monthly league for that and have dabbled in a few different decks. We tried Doomsday, which officially melted my brain, still recovering from that one, and tried Storm to a bit more success. And I thought for this time around, I would take a look at a personal favorite of mine. And when I was getting into Magic back in 2005, this was one of the weirdest, quirkiest combo decks in Extended at the time, and you still see it even today popping up in Legacy occasionally. So this is Cephalid Breakfast, and in the mold of some of Magic's greatest combo decks, it takes an obscure card from one set that no one would put in a deck otherwise, and a second card that fits the same description from a completely different time frame, and matches them together and lets the magic happen. So the combo here is the Encore creatures from the Tempest block, and so we're using the cheapest one here in Nomad's Encore, and they all have the ability that for 0 damage, the next 1 damage that would be dealt to that creature is dealt to target creature you control instead. And that word target is going to be very important here because we have Cephalid Illusionist, the cheapest of the Cephalids from Odyssey block, and whenever this creature becomes a target of a spell or ability, you mill 3 cards. So what this means is you have a free and endlessly repeatable way to target Illusionist over and over again, which effectively allows you to mill your entire deck in one go. And if you are familiar with Hermit Druid at all, we are basically building our own Hermit Druid, or if you've played any of the larger constructed formats, not difficult to see how milling your entire deck could lead to some ridiculous things. Nowadays, it's much cleaner because we have Thassa's Oracle, so we have a very clean kill via there. But back in the day, when this deck was first appearing on the scene, you had to jump through a few hoops in order to actually finish the game. From that point, stuff like Frozen, Reclamation, flashing that back to put Reanimate back in your deck, and then you would draw the Reanimate and bring back something else. But by this point, in 2011, we have had Time Spiral, making things a lot easier because we have 3 copies of Narcomoeba, so when we mill our deck, we get these 3 Narcomoebas into play. We can then flashback Dread Return on Karmic Guide. That in turn brings back Kiki Jiki. Kiki Jiki can then copy the Karmic Guide to get another one, and then that brings back the Sky Hussar, which untaps a Kiki Jiki, and now you have this loop here with Kiki Jiki, Sky Hussar, and you can make infinite hasty attackers, and then this leaves you with a few spare bodies left over here. So if you've drawn one of these pieces, you can flashback a therapy on yourself to get that in the graveyard where it needs to be, or just make sure the coast is clear by targeting them and taking interaction that they could have. And so this combo, you can already see, you can go turn 1 Nomads into turn 2 Illusionist. That is a clean turn 2 kill. And although it can be interfered with by removal spells and so on, the rest of the deck is designed to help you bob and weave around that. But just in terms of raw speed, this is up there with the fastest decks in the format at this point. But it can also play an interesting grindy game as well. And so if we look at the rest of the deck, we have some of the interaction that you would expect for Force of Will, 3 days, 2 Cabal Therapy, the Brainstorm Ponder package, which you'll be familiar with, just helping to tie the room together. And because we are a creature combo deck, we get to play 4 copies of Worldly Chooser to dig up either of our pieces, as well as Grand Abolisher to help force it through, or some of these sideboard bullets like Aethersworn Canonist or Fairy Macabre, for example. And we also get to be an Ether Vial deck too, where both of our combo pieces are creatures, and so this can help you get those through counter magic or sorcery speed interaction. Make sure you don't have to expose either one of these, and this is going to be one of your better cards in any kind of longer game there. And then over here in the sideboard, we have 4 copies of Swords to Plowshares. Just I know from playing against some of the regulars in these leagues in the past, a lot of Infect, for example, various creature decks, and this is an interesting element of revisiting a format after so long, is you get to apply this modern frame of reference and this modern body of knowledge to those older formats. And so at the time, you could be playing this quite powerful Infect deck, and yet no one really was. It wasn't really until Tom Ross put that deck on the map in Legacy a few years later that people started to do that. Or Death Shadow, for example. That's a card that people just didn't really know how to build around for quite a long time. It took some time to figure that out, but you can go back and play, Sultai Shadow, Dimir Shadow, and have a good time doing that. So that's an introduction to the deck and how it works, and I will bring up the games here. I'm not doing this video because any of these games were especially compelling themselves, but I just thought it would be an interesting window into what this gameplay looks like. Let's move over the fact that my constructive rating dipping below 1700 there. Very shameful, but in any case. So I am against Bobo Fraggles, who is the TO for this league, and so had to submit lists to them. They knew I was playing this, and so they graciously told me that they were on Infect, which matches what they were playing in the past. And so this hand is pretty good, right? We have Ether Vial to help sneak through this. We have Forcible, and if we compare this with a blue card, then we can interfere with something in the first few turns or force through our combo, and then 2 copies of Wily Shooter to get the combo pieces. So especially on the play, feeling pretty good about this hand, and especially if this Vial resolves, which it does not. And you get the Telltale going down to 19 there in advance. My opponent leads on Glistener Elf. So this Legacy version of Infect with Invigorate and Berserk, you're not as gated on mana as the modern versions sometimes are. And so you can very easily die on turn 2 to Glistener Elf here. Just double Invigorate plus some other pump spell, or Invigorate plus Berserk is 10 by itself. So I'm already feeling a little scared here, and so I play the Misty Rainforest, aiming to fetch Tropical Island, so I can Wily Shooter for Illusionist, put this together on turn 3, as long as I don't die, and maybe made a small misstep here and not sequencing my lands differently the last turn, just to double spell here. But there's Invigorate, and there's Berserk, and they tell me in the chat that they actually drew these on turn 1 and turn 2. So a decent hand turned into just a turn 2 kill with protection pretty easily. And that's the strength of the Infect deck, which I could see myself trying if I play this league again in a future month. So on the play, at least for game 2 here, and I'll show my sideboarding. So Daze is very good in this matchup, especially on the play. However, as the game goes longer, it rapidly diminishes in utility, and I think that the way I've sideboarded, where I've brought in the 4 swords and the spell sky and so on, unless I do have some kind of nut draw, it's likely that the game is going to go longer anyway, and so decide to settle in for a slower game, have to mull a bad 7 into a fine 6, but not an inspiring one, and I'm already getting a little worried here. But at least I have 2 interactive spells to buy some time. And Brainstorm is an excellent pickup. The Gitaxian Probe Me, and that's a card that is still legal in this iteration of Legacy, and certainly one of the more powerful cards in the format. And they can't steal it from Primordium, which I was quite surprised to see. So I don't want to close out of this, I suppose, but if you look at my deck list, the only targets for this are the 4 Ether Vials and the Spell Sky, and I suppose the Canonist as well, if that comes in. But to me, this signals that my opponent is so worried about the Spell Sky that they're willing to board in these fairly narrow removal spells just to hedge against that. And so I could fire off the tutor here, but I don't know. I don't have either piece yet. So if I get one, I still need to draw the other. I would rather wait until I know which one I need to get. And also with this brainstorm, then the tutor has some use as a shuffle effect as well. So I decide to just take my turn. I draw one of the combo pieces, so that's a good start. And I could go for the Illusionist here, but I figure that's bad enough against Daze, which I don't know how many copies of that would still be in their deck when they're on the draw and they need to make room for a bunch of these other cards, but they have to be somewhat scared of just a fast combo draw, and Daze can, in theory, help to break that up. So I decide to just pass the turn instead, see what happens, and they just animate the Inkmoth Nexus and attack. So there's not much point going for a removal spell here, because 1 infect damage is fairly unlikely to be the difference between winning and losing. That said, with the increments of damage that they can stack up, where this is a 1/1, so let's say 2 copies of Invigorate, that brings it up to 9, or Invigorate plus Vines of Fastwood, let's say, that's 9, and so being on 1 actually could make all the difference there. But what I don't want to happen is I go for Sword and then get trumped by Vines. I would, which I guess right now they can't kick the Vines, so there's no concern about that pushing through even more damage. So I actually think this was a mistake in retrospect. I should have cast a Sword during combat. As it happens, I can cast one on end step, and they Daze it. So this was an interesting decision point for me, because I know their deck has a copy of Crop Rotation and a copy of Wasteland. So if I get the Tropical Island here, one thing that can happen is that they Crop Rotation away the Nexus, either for another Nexus or for a Wasteland, and tag my Tropical Island, which, because of the information that they have from their probe, they know I'm at least somewhat landlight, and so that could really put me quite far behind. But I figured that I do want the green source for Worldly Tutor to play towards a combo in the near future. And so I decided to expose my dual land there, which, again, could be another mistake. So was a little loose on this turn cycle. And so I paid for 1 Daze, and they actually have a 2nd Daze. So I am very happy to have traded a Swords for 2 cards there. Oh, and okay, so I brainstorm into Nomads and 3 total copies of Ether Vial. So I kind of know that I'm brainstorm locked, so to speak, and I know that 2 copies of Vial are going back. It's also frustrating because now this seal is actually useful, where it can delay a Vial from getting to the point where I can actually use it to get this Illusionist down. So that was a little unfortunate, but my opponent casts Glistener Elf. And I go for Illusionist here because I've already burned through 2 copies of Daze, so it's unlikely that they have more on top of that. And I don't really want to have to pitch this to a Forcible, and that gets more likely the longer the game goes on. Plus, I figure if let's say they have a Forcible, if I can burn through that now, it makes it easier for me to set up for Worldly Tutor into a 2nd copy of Illusionist, which at this point is going to take me 2 turn cycles. So I think there is a good reason to just try this here. And if it works, then great. Turns out it does work. And my opponent, who was recording this match as well, just asked me to go through the motions here to show their viewers how this works. And it's good practice to do that in general, because I could actually get stranded with too many combo pieces in my hand. They know most of my hand from the pro, but in theory, if I'd drawn, Cabal Therapy, Kiki Jiki, Dredge Return, for example, and I can't get all the pieces where I need to get them, then I could end up having to delay the combo for a turn because of that. The nice thing, in a way, though, is with this setup, I'm milling most of my deck, I'm getting these Narcomoebas. Even if that were to happen somehow, it's going to be very difficult for them to actually get through for damage, unless they have exactly Berserk. So you can create this pretty formidable battlefield, actually, just with the combo, even if you don't fully combo off yourself. And yeah, now we're just going through the motions here. There we go. So I'll bring this one to game 3 here. And this was the one that got a little more scrappy, let's say. So I have what I think is a decent hand here, and my opponent goes to 6 and then to 5. So feeling pretty good about that turn of events. I have a combo piece. I have therapy that I can use to try and tag a force of will or something in advance, and then 2 copies of brainstorm to tie the room together. So they do cast Glistener Elf, and this is one way they could steal the game, right? If they just turn to me and they have no cards left over, but they aren't going to need those at that point. And so drawing Force of Will is a really nice safety valve to hedge against all of that. And so now I have to think, am I going to therapy this turn? And if so, what do I therapy for? I decide to therapy because, firstly, just therapy against untapped mana for Brainstorm gets a lot worse as the game goes on. And then on top of that, I do want to try and snipe the card that could lead to an early kill so that I don't have to burn my Force of Will when I don't want to. It is a little awkward that this means that, I don't have green for Tutor in case I do draw that, but I think that's a fine price to pay. So I cast Therapy for Invigorate because they have 4 copies of that, and that's the easiest way to stitch a kill together. And I see Viridian Corruptor, Brainstorm, and a Tormod Script that they didn't play on the first turn, interestingly. Not that I would ever therapy that in the dark, so I guess it's fairly safe, but... So they attack for 1, and I decide that I am going to Force of Will this Tormod Script, because with the Brainstorm, I have decent odds of finding a Nomad in the next 4 or 5 cards, let's say, or I could find Fetch Land plus Worldly Shooter, and I figure with this few cards left, they're actually quite far away from killing me, so I don't need to be as worried about some kind of Infect kill in the short term. And so they fetch a land and play Noble Hierarch. So I know the card left over here, basically. In theory, they could have shoveled something away, I guess. But so on my turn 2, I play Cephalid Illusionist. And this has a kind of a hidden mode here where you can pay 2 and a blue and tap it to prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to and by target creature you control this turn. So in theory, if you're playing a game of Limited or something, this is a good way to muck up combat while milling yourself in a block that has Threshold, Flashback, and so on and so forth. But against a deck whose entire purpose is to load up damage on one particular creature, this can actually, be surprisingly annoying just as a fair card. So they get 1 attack in here. Obviously, I'm not going to block. I go up to 4 Infect. And so I pass the turn with the intention of activating this. And now I kind of am in the danger zone because Berserk would be incredibly irritating here. And anything that swats the Illusionist out of the way puts me in a tough spot. And anything that leads to Illusionist dying puts me in a tough spot too. One of those cards can be Vines of Vastwood. So this is green with Kicker for green as well. Target creature can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control this turn, and that includes my own creatures. So if they cast Vines on my Illusionist, the Illusionist ability fizzles, and then it ends up chump blocking this elf, basically. So there are quite a few ways, more than you might think at first glance, for me to get blown out here. So I'm not actually feeling great about my position, but I can't afford to let this go unblocked because then Vines still kills me, and also then any pump spell would kill me too. So this 5-card draw from my opponent has actually turned into a pretty scary one, and they play a second Infect creature in Corruptor. So now I'm thinking, all right, I have a lot of looks at this Nomads. If I hit it, I'm going to win the game here. And we cast Brainstorm. And I miss. But I draw this real motley crew of creatures here. And I realized that with these lands and with my board, I can actually hardcast my choice of these over the next few turns, so I have to think about how to sequence these. So I eventually settle on, I put back Sky Hussar and a land. I made my 4th land drop, and so my intention is to cross my fingers, hope I get to Fog with Illusionist for 1 turn, and then maybe Karmic Guide or Venser could help me out here. So block the bigger one, get the shield on here, end up just taking 1, which I was very thankful about, but still have to be somewhat scared of these 2 cards in hand. And so now I have a choice, because I can play Karmic Guide to try and get back Sky Hussar or another Illusionist. I can play Venser, or I can ponder and try to find the Nomads. And if I miss, I can still hold up either Illusionist or Venser. And note that the cards that I brainstormed back, Illusionist targeting itself actually milled those. So I built my own shuffle effect, so to speak there. But that Hussar is now in my graveyard, which makes it really tempting to try and Karmic Guide that back and have 2 good blockers. So I settle on that line, but it is notably very weak to days. And sure enough, replay freezing here.